So good morning, welcome to the Permanent Commission on the Status of Racial, Indigenous, and Maine Tribal Populations Committee meeting. My name is Rachel Talbot Ross. I currently serve as the chair, and I bring you greetings on behalf of the Commission to all those who are watching and participating. We have a full agenda today. The meeting will go until 1 o'clock. This is just a meeting of the Permanent Commission, although I do know that we've got some legislators who are joining us today and are watching, and we want to just extend all of our thanks for your participation in some of our recent work. Really, really grateful for your commitment to this process. If we could, we'll start out with welcome and introductions by behalf of the Permanent Commission members, and then we'll recognize our staff from the Department of Labor, our legislative staff, and then a guest in that order so that we can begin our meeting. I will call on Keith Bisson from the Permanent Commission to get us started with those members. Just quickly introduce yourself and indicate the constituency or the role that you play on the commission, if you could. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Chairwoman Rachel Talbot Ross and everyone. My name is Keith Bisson. I'm president of Coastal Enterprises Incorporated, and I am filling the seat for a community development financial institution.
Please feel free, Joby.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Joby Coelho. I'm a senior policy advocate with Maine Equal Justice, and I'm filling the role of representing a statewide organization with policy expertise in public benefits.
Thank you. And Joby, it was a little difficult to hear. If you want to turn up your volume a little bit. I see Garrett and then Reverend Lewis.
My name is Garrett Stewart. I'm on the AFL-CIO Executive Committee, and I represent labor rights. Thank you.
Good morning, Reverend Kenneth Lewis. I'm the senior pastor of the Green Memorial African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church in Portland, and I represent the faith-based community.
Thank you both. Ian?
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Ian Yappy. I'm with Mano & Mano. I'm here representing an organization that works with immigrants.
Thank you. And then I have Dee Clark and Isaiah.
Good afternoon. I'm Dee Clark. I'm the executive director and founder of Survivors Speak USA, which is all about trafficking and sexploitation. My seat is because of my work in Homeless Voices for Justice for over 20 years and homelessness and housing insecurities.
Hi, I'm Isaiah Reed, and I am a student at UMaine Farmington, and I am filling the seat representing the youth population.
Thank you. Bruce?
Bruce King. I work doing workforce development in Lewiston, second generation Mexican immigrant and formerly incarcerated individual, filling the seat of impacted community individual.
Thank you. And I think our last Permanent Commission member is James.
Hi, everyone. My name is James Mile. I'm a policy analyst at the Maine Center for Economic Policy. I'm filling the role on the Commission for a person from an economic policy organization. Thanks.
Thank you, James. Department of Labor staff, legislative staff, if you could introduce yourselves, please. Cheryl?
Sorry, I had to unmute. I'm actually now Cheryl Davis because I just got married about a week ago. And I'm with the Maine Department of Labor, State Workforce Board, Labor Program Specialist, and I am administrative support for this commission.
Hey everyone, although my title says I am Katie Walsh, I am in fact fellow. I am just running the Zoom today under Katie's login, but I am the Chief of Staff in the House Majority Office.
My name is Reginald Parson, and I'm a legislative aide in the Speaker's office.
Thank you all. Congratulations, Cheryl. And I know we have a couple of guests. We'll start with Carol Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Carol Kelly. I'm a consultant in the Portland area, and I'm here today to just help introduce the data that you guys have weighed in on through your worksheets, your priority setting worksheets, and we'll be discussing the preliminary results.
Thank you. Legislators, I see Representative Farnsworth, and I'm not seeing others, maybe Representative Carney. If you would like to just quickly introduce yourselves, we're grateful that you are joining us today.
Dick Farnsworth from Portland, and I will be a fly on the wall to listen.
And nope, I think we're all set. Anyone else on the call right now that has not had the opportunity to introduce themselves? Okay, great. I will just remind everyone, as you are well aware at this point, that we are live streamed in order for the public to be able to listen to our meetings, and we are being recorded in case folks can't join us right now, but would like to be updated on our activities and can watch later. I think that's all the housekeeping right now. Is everyone have an agenda? If you could take a look at that. I want to ask at this time if anyone would like to revise or adjust the agenda in any way. Seeing none. I also would like to just remind you that we have a set of meeting agreements. And so I know you're well aware of them. If anyone has a problem with meeting them at this meeting, they should let it be known now. Seeing none, thank you very much. We will move on to our work today, which will take up almost all of our time. We're at 11:41 now. We will go until about 10 minutes to 1. And if we need some more time, we'll add it. But we are going to do a thorough check-in on the informal legislative bill review initiative that we have had engaged in for the last 4 weeks with the state legislature and bipartisan group of legislators. We're going to really try to hone in on where we're at right now. As you can see, with Carol's help and Megan's help, we're going to look at the current data and discuss what we want to do as next steps. We also want to just quickly review our decision-making process. We had agreed at one point that that would be done by consensus. And then we want to talk about what a final product looks like. We've been using the term report, but we'll do a deeper dive into what a final product out of this effort should look like. And then finally, based on the discussion, we will, in all likelihood, revise our timeline. We will close out with any feedback or lingering questions and then adjourn at 1 o'clock. So to get us started, the process, where we're at. As you all know quite well at this point, this was a process in which we were engaged with volunteer legislators to review the over 460 bills that were currently before the 129th legislature in terms of identifying priority bills that would allow us to make some movement on eliminating racial and ethnic disparities here in the state of Maine. We are currently at phase 3 of that process. The first 2 phases were in which we engaged in subcommittee work with legislators, 7 subcommittees with 10 people per subcommittee. We reviewed approximately 65 bills for each subcommittee. And we went through the first phase, which was the filtering phase. We then followed that with an assessment based on some methodology and some tools that Carol Kelly had provided to the Permanent Commission. And we assessed the bills and then reported them out in a full committee that comprised both legislators and Permanent Commission members. We've gone through all of that, and we are now in a phase that is limited to the Permanent Commission. Our original calendar had us discussing the results of a quantitative analysis based on a rubric and that was provided. And we had intended next week, next Wednesday, to finalize that list, and by next Friday, which would have been August 5th, we would have produced a final report, a product. As I said, we will revisit that timeline. But we are now going to review some of the data that with the help of Carol. And I just want to make sure everyone is comfortable with moving forward. If you wanted to add anything about the phases, where we're at now, anything at all before we dive into the data. Great. Not up. Yes, Dee, please.
I'm hoping it's going to explain itself as we go. But after receiving the email of this grid looking thing, I have no idea how to look at it. So it might just show itself as it's explained, I hope.
It will definitely do so. And at any point in time, Dee or other commission members, you can absolutely raise your hand and, oops, I did something. You can absolutely raise your hand, and I'm sure Kara won't mind the interruption. What we'll do is we'll discuss it as we go. And so there's no need to hold your questions. We really want to end this meeting. The goal is that everyone is comfortable with where we're at, knows how we're going to move forward, and can participate at 100%. So seeing no other questions, I'll turn it over to Carol and maybe Megan. Take it away. And again, feel free to discuss as is, as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Carol, and I'll start, but Megan, of course, jump in here as needed. So I'm going to start with just a quick snapshot building on what Representative Talbot Ross started with, which is that we had 454, I believe that was the count, 454-ish bills that you folks started with. The subcommittee process eliminated 300 of those. So at the end of the subcommittee process, you were down to 154 bills. And those 154 bills were provided in the worksheets, which you, almost all of you diligently filled out. Thank you for doing that. That's a big lift to be going through 154. You ranked them using the criteria provided, 4 criteria for ease and 4 for impact, which calculated a score for each of those bills on ease and impact. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to screen share a grid in just a minute, but I wanted to just do a quick snapshot of just the data, what we know about the data. So we received 20 responses, 20 worksheets were returned, 10 from permanent commission members and 10 from legislators. And if you remember, the legislators were given this as an opt-in or opt-out. They could participate as they could. And so it was great to get 10 legislators taking the time to fill out these worksheets in addition to 10 of you folks. That gets us to a 20-person foundation of input here. The information I'm sharing with you guys is a combination of those permanent commission responses and legislative responses. So everything we're going to look at today, this snapshot, which is the preliminary data, is the combination of those two cohorts of worksheets that came in. If you, as we're discussing this, say to yourselves, gee, it would be great to see some of that criteria played out. We'd love to see the patterns of those, the criteria within ease or within impact. You don't have any of that right now, but that would certainly be possible if you felt like you wanted to break it down further. But right now, what I'm going to show you is the average of the total ease and impact score. And what I'm also going to provide you is this table, which I think you all received last night, which basically says, okay, of the 154 bills that were considered, here are 52 of them, which kind of rise to the top. And when I say rise to the top, when I show you the graphic, I think that'll make a lot more sense. So I just want to I guess, say that we certainly can provide more information, more graphics, more colorful tables, and you all just keep thinking about what you would find most helpful. We can also peel apart the data from the permanent commission member responses and the legislator responses. So if you decide we'd like to see all of this in similar format, but we'd like to only see how the permanent commission ranked these bills, that of course is an option as well. So I just want you guys to know that there's plenty of permutations to how we pull the data and how we present it. So I'm going to start now, Megan, unless I should pause. I would be inclined to screen share the chart. Is that a good next step?
I don't have anything further to add, but maybe just a pause for any questions before you share the chart if everyone is following along so far.
Yeah, great idea. So far, so good, folks. Okay, let me try to get my little screen sharing going. Okay, here we go. So as you guys hopefully saw in the tool as originally provided in template form, the idea here is that by ranking on ease and impact, you're actually using the scoring, the bills will populate in this grid. And so I'm scrolling down so you can see that the horizontal axis is ease, the vertical axis is impact. And right now,
can I interrupt for 1 second, Carol? Can you full screen share your sheet? I'm losing some of the data because it's not full screen share. Could you do that? I don't know if you can or not.
Reverend Lewis, I'm sorry that I may not be technologically. What I've done is I've tried to blow this up to make it as big as possible so that I could.
Carol, I think if you go in your Excel, actually under View,
okay,
you might be able to at least get rid of the guidelines. If you go to 100%, I think there after next to Zoom, over to your right a little bit.
Okay, I'm actually at 130.
Oh, you are? Okay.
That's possibly why it feels like, but I can go back to 100. Let's see what happens. So you're going to get less detail, but more of the bigger picture. Does Reverend Lewis, does that?
Not quite, but you continue on. I can follow. It's just, I thought it might be difficult for the public to see as well as some of our commissioners, but.
Okay. I apologize for the limitations of either my technological prowess or Zoom or some combination of both. And I think we can all guess which one is playing a bigger role. Okay, so the grid here is that you can see impact is on the vertical axis, and I'm scrolling down a bit, ease on the horizontal axis. Now I'm going to just scroll back up so that you can see the cluster of responses. So this is, if you really peeled this all apart and you peeled all the labels apart, there's 154 points with labels. And so the trick here is to, in the priority setting process, to figure out, okay, where do the quadrant breaks happen? And so the red line that you're seeing right now, that's set at about 12.5 on each ease and impact, which means that you get a cluster of about 5 tier 1 bills. They're the tier 1 is the high ease and high impact, and those are the bills that still appear in the upper right quadrant. That's your tier 1 quadrant. Tier 2 quadrant is upper left and lower right. They score high on one of those two, but not on both. And tier 3, the things you are least likely to do, those are the things that show up in lower left on the quadrant. So the red lines are the breaks. And when those red lines shift, that's when you see more bills emerging into a tier 1 highest priority scenario. And so translating that to the table is the next thing I'll talk about. But before I do, let me just pause and see if just this basic premise of the quadrants is so far so good, making sense. Okay, awesome, good. Great. So I'm gonna just, this is the concept, and I don't think that the quadrant format is really the best way to visualize this. So I'm gonna stop screen sharing. We can always go back to it. But I'm gonna have you look at the table that I sent around, or that was sent around last night. And the idea here is that the column on the left, far left column, clearly the 52 bills that again kind of rise to the top no matter where you put those red quadrant breaks, and we can back those off as much as you'd like, but these are 52 bills that rise to the top. If you really tighten down on that tier 1 so that you're trying to really make that a small upper right quadrant, then the break is at 12.5. That's the visual I just showed you. And you can see in your top, on the table, on the label, tier 1, you'll get 5 bills in tier 1, and you'll get 17 bills in tier 2. So 17 bills will be around the edges, while the tier 1, the upper right quadrant, would be 5. And as you back those quadrant breaks off, the numbers start to increase. And so you get more tier 1s and more tier 2s because you're creating more space in the quadrants. So using the color on this table, anything that is white and unlabeled is tier 3. These are the things that live in each of these variations. These are the things that live in the lower left quadrant. And as the quadrants, as you start to make more and more room for bills to end up in tier 1 and tier 2, you can see the shift from white to yellow to green. And so it's a transition, it's a phasing in. So the more leeway you allow on the quadrant break, the bigger you make the upper right quadrant, the more bills end up populating at a tier 1 level. So we're moving from white to yellow to green. In a couple of cases, there are some that are very on the verge. And so I've labeled those. I have another formula that we can get into or not about the leaning tier 1s. But I think you can see now, hopefully now that I've described the color coding, you can see the pattern here, white to yellow to green, as you move the quadrant breaks. So I'll pause again and just see if you have questions about the format or the layout of the table.
Carol, I'm sorry, can you repeat? So if I'm going across, are we going from lower left to upper right to lower right? Is that the order in across the grid?
Across the grid, this is really saying if we move those red lines on the graph and we make the upper right quadrant bigger, these bills will have a small number of bills to start. And as we make that upper right quadrant bigger, more and more bills will qualify as tier 1. So they move in the first column, they may start out as tier 3 when it's a really small, tight upper right quadrant. And as you move the grid lines back, they start to emerge as tier 2. And then eventually, with enough space, they all become tier 1.
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So every single one of these bills would qualify as tier 1 if we had our quadrant breaks back at 3. But in this case, we're trying to make a smaller number because you folks don't need to be working with 154 bills, or it's going to take a lot longer than you have. So.
Not to mention that at that point, it would be harder and harder to see the impact that we seek.
I was just going to mention the wish for is that whatever the LD is, I have no idea because I can't memorize, and there's a few I know. I would like to have seen that. That's
the titles, you mean?
The titles of the LD numbers, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's again, that would be easy to do. If you folks decide, look, there's, we don't need to see four versions of this. Let's take one of the columns and populate the LD, the titles of the bills. Anything's possible here.
I would add to that too. I think Reverend Lewis had emailed about having some other detailed information about whether the bill has already been voted on not to pass, or whether it has a unanimous report, as well as sort of where it might stand in terms of a fiscal note and those sort of things. And Reggie has agreed that once we sort of get our heads around what cohort of bills we want to look at, then we could then go in and add that additional information, so you all had a fuller picture when you were looking at the bills into totality. But we didn't want to do that before we really narrowed down what that universe was we were looking at, so that we didn't put out a bunch of information that we didn't necessarily need if we weren't going to include all the bills.
Yep.
Thank you for mentioning that. I was going to mention that as well, so I'm appreciative of that. I take the opportunity to pull up the bills while you're talking about them on my phone here. So the titles, if we have a couple of instruments we can use, we could see the titles as well. So just a little suggestion to some of our commissioners. That's a way to at least follow along a little easier until the text is added to the sheet.
So I'm noting that as in our final materials, or in our next phase of materials, that we provide more content about the bills themselves. That totally makes sense. And I do wonder, to Megan's point, whether now in this example, we've basically said, here's 102 bills that don't show up anymore, right? So you've gone from 154 down to 52. We could make that, the bills that you're still, considering, that could be a bigger number or a smaller number. You could lop off that fourth column, for example. It's really the fifth total, but you could just, put the quadrant, break it back to 11 and a half, and then you'd be dealing with 42 bills instead of 52. There's lots of variations on this in terms of how, to Megan's point, how you'd want to cull this down before starting your deliberations. So I would be inclined to maybe pause there, Madam Chair, and just let you decide. I think there's some decisions to be made about whether whether more time is taken for the remaining permanent commission members to provide their worksheets, and the type of information you'd like to provide as you begin the discussion.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you, Megan. So let's open it up for some discussion on the number of responses that we have received, and if we would like to give just probably till the end of today. I know it takes a while for you, Carol, to do the analysis. In order to get 100% return from permanent commission members, and also to allow legislators one last chance to weigh in. And I will preface this just before we open it up, is to say that our timeline has changed. As you all were aware, we had selected August 5th and August 3rd and August 5th. Based on a guesstimate that the legislature would go back in as soon as August 10th. That is not happening. I do not have any information to tell you when we may go in, but I do know it's not August 10th. So I think releasing a little bit of pressure on the process in order to get a better sample size may make sense. That's up to all of you, but for me, the pressure is off just a little bit, which means if we could get a larger sample size, that would work in our favor for the process. So that's one question that we need to debate. And then the other that you posed is just around slightly more information, and to the question that Reverend Lewis had asked around further adding some criteria now that's new to the process that would allow for further filtration, like a bill has been removed, or it didn't come out of committee, or will never come out of committee, or it was voted on not to pass. New filtering that the permanent commission can take. So those are a couple of discussion points, if I've said it correctly, Carol, that we should now open it up for commission members to discuss.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Reverend Lewis, and then Carol.
Yeah, just to kind of explain my general thinking, I think when we take a look at those the tiering process, the quadrants, we go from 5 to 13 on the second tier, if I'm counting it correctly. And I think, Carol, you said the total number ends up around 54. My general thinking was that if a particular LD had a OTP, a ONTP, that would help us in our deliberative process as it relates to time, even though there's additional, the timeline has been, will probably in all likelihood be extended based on our review. But I was a little bit concerned of whether or not we would be spending a significant amount of deliberative time on a bill that, you know, failed in committee 0 to 13 or something like that, that the likelihood that it would be advanced was relatively small. And so I think as the commission, we can add or remove any type of filtering processes as we move forward. And so I just wanted to explain my general thinking, Madam Chair, around that as to why I was asking those questions. Thank you.
Absolutely. Carol, thank you, Reverend Lewis.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The only thing I'm not sure I did a great job of making sure this has, I'm putting a fine point on this, which is as you are talking about this and what you'd like to receive back once folks have weighed in, if you decide to let, you know, more worksheets come in, is whether you'd like to peel apart the responses from legislators and the responses from the permanent commission members, because you will obviously get a slightly different, you know, the calculations will be a little different, and the bills that end up in tier 1 in each case, though I've done a little compare and contrast, it's not drastically different. It will tweak it a little bit. And so I just want to make sure you're getting the information from me that is most valuable and that is weighted appropriately. Thank you for letting me just put a finer point on that.
No, I thank you for that, Carol, because that finer point is very important to the consensus-driven decision-making process. And so the group is going to have to decide on whether or not it's making a decision based on the full committee's recommendations or just the commissioners. The other reason why it's important is whatever final product we produce could include this very short list of bills that we decide on, but it could be within the context that allows folks to understand this is where legislators landed, this is where permanent commission members landed, and this is the final. So we could make some delineation in the final product around all of the ways in which we saw this. So I guess, yes.
Oh, sorry, Madam Chair. I was just going to add that I think it'd be interesting to see the data like on both sides, if not to use one or the other, but to, as you mentioned, compare and contrast. I was like seconding that idea. I think it'd give a good idea of which ones to focus on.
Thank you. So the first question I think it would be great to answer is if we want to allow, and I'm just going to make the suggestion to the end of today, for additional responses to be received so that our sample size is a bit larger than what it currently is, which is, I believe, at 20. Maybe we've gotten one more response since we've even started this meeting today. I'm not sure, but to allow for a larger sample size. That's the question right now, commissioners.
Madam Chair, I would support that, especially if it's possible to get the other 6 members of the commission, if I think that's the right number, just because people may have had, things may have come up or something and just weren't able to do it. So I would support that personally.
This is Megan. I just want to add a little clarification. We do have now 10 of the 14 commission members. We have responses from 10 of the 14 commission members. And I am curious if it might make sense to allow for a little bit past the end of the day today, because I imagine most people, the issue with this is that it is very time consuming, and I'm guessing most people already have a pretty busy day today, so it might not result in a whole lot of extra data if we only give a number of more hours. I would defer to Carol in terms of the turnaround time for more data and what might make sense if you received the information, say by the end of the weekend, if that would be reasonable, just to give people an actual amount of time where they may have some free time to put a little bit more into this effort.
Megan, I'll respond quickly. This is Carol. That I am here for you guys, and I will make my schedule work around what works for you. And the weekend, next Wednesday, next Friday, whatever you decide, I'm going to make sure I'm available to produce the end result. So don't let me stand in the way of the decision that works best for the group.
Madam Chair, this is Isaiah again.
My apologies. Please go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was wondering if we maybe like make the list less like for the remaining ones that have to enter, we could go through and today work to like maybe remove the bills that are maybe definitely not our top priority, and so we have a shorter list to work with. And also I think that the discussion might help with knowing how other people are ranking them, because when I rank them, I think I may have used like a different relative scale on impact and stuff than everyone else might have used. Like if someone happened to rank things higher or lower for like, but with the same idea in mind, if that makes sense.
Yeah, my feeling about removing those bills that are already ought not to pass or will not come out of committee is that I think it's fine to acknowledge their status, but if this is a bill that indeed would have achieved what we want, then it should still be part of the report. It doesn't have to obviously be part of the priority list, but I can give you one example. There's a tribal bill that is one of the 5. I believe it's 1907, but there is, and that is an act to give concurrent, it follows the Tribal Law and Order Act, and it gives jurisdiction to tribal courts in order to prosecute crimes at Class C. So I don't want to do a deep dive on it. I'm not trying to re-debate the bill. But that bill most likely will not come out of committee. So by ignoring that bill, we ignore very critical public policy that would allow for tribal sovereignty to be fully realized in the state of Maine. I'd hate to leave that out of the report just because it will not come out of committee. So that's just an example why we need to know the status, as Reverend Lewis has suggested, but that doesn't necessarily mean that a bill that is in that particular status shouldn't be part of how we discuss the results.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to be clear that I'm not indicating that those bills should be left off the report. I think it's important that anything that the commission has identified as having some opportunity to improve the conditions based on our goals and objectives, that it should be in our, whatever we're calling it, a report. But if there are some particular bills that are going to be adjudicated by the legislature, that we want to weigh pretty heavily on those pretty quickly. And because other bills will come back, right? They'll come back in some way, shape, or form, and our statement will already be there. And we won't have to re-deliberate on those bills. The names may change, the numbers may change, but we've already made a statement.
That's correct.
I also want to add, just to clarify, make sure I said it correctly. I guess what I meant is not removing, as you said, not removing them from the report, or removing bills that may not pass through the legislator, but to go through these and take out the ones that may have been like mostly tier 3 through all the quadrants, and the ones that the commission may not prioritize.
May I chime in?
Please.
Just real quickly, I think, one thing to kind of just name here is that this is our first round of doing this. Hopefully they go back to special session. Should it be the case that that doesn't happen, what we're doing is still vitally important because we are setting a tone for what we are going to represent as a commission. So if there are bills that don't necessarily have a lot of likelihood to pass, but still fit clearly within the mission and the purview of what we are doing, I think that it's vital that we elevate them to whatever extent that we can. And I also recognize, I agree with the Reverend that we need to push forward whatever we can. But should it come that those particular bills may not get heard, or even if they do, just making sure that people are hearing that these topics are topics that we are considering vital to creating equity. So I don't want that to get lost in it. And maybe this isn't the time, and I accept that if that's the pushback, maybe that isn't the time for us to kind of stake those types of things. But I do believe that we are setting the tone for the work that's going to be coming. So I just want to make sure that we're aware of that.
That I think is what I was trying. That's what I completely agree with, what Bruce just said.
Yes, Carol.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to respond to the second part of the question, which is about whether it's important to be consistent among you in how you are ranking ease and impact. And the answer is no, you just need to be consistent with yourself because it averages out. And so don't do this one morning where you have a very rosy outlook and then wait another day and do it when you don't, because that's what'll that's what'll throw things off in terms of the averages. Be consistent in how you do it, and then when everything is put together, because this is about a pattern, it's not about the specific data points, because we are moving the quadrant breaks proportionally. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think the short answer is don't worry about coordinating with others. Just kind of think about it yourself, even if you have to, do it over the course of several hours or several days. Just try to be consistent yourself, and it all works out.
So it is now 12:18, but I believe we've reached a place, and we can have more discussion, obviously, where I've heard taking out the tier 3 now, even though we will extend the response period to over the weekend, I think was a suggestion by end of business today. It all depends on Carol's schedule. I also heard that we would acknowledge those bills, that are in a current status of ought not to pass or may not come out of committee, because that's not our decision if they pass or they don't pass. But we would acknowledge those bills as an additional filter and remove that. All of this is moving us towards a final consensus decision-making process. So a deliberation on the reality of the bills that need our deliberation. We're trying to move closer and closer to that place. So as the Reverend has said, we are not debating bills that have the no likelihood of being on a priority list in the end. Is that about right? Is everyone good? So let's make some decisions about extending the period of time. Carol, did I understand that that would be okay to extend it? If you could give us that time frame. Okay. So by
You should make a motion, Madam Chair, or somebody,
yeah,
somebody needs to make a motion and someone has to second it.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I move that we would extend time for submitting our rankings to 3 p.m. on Monday, August the 3rd.
It's been moved. Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Madam Chair.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none. All those in favor, if you can just raise your hand, and Isaiah, if you could give a yay or a nay into the microphone.
I'm raising my hand.
Okay. Any abstentions? Any opposed? Let the record reflect that that was a unanimous vote. Monday, August 3rd, 3 p.m. will be the new deadline. Carol, thank you, Megan and Carol, for giving us that additional opportunity. Megan, that will be extended to legislators as well?
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Okay, thank you very much for getting that communique out to them. We should decide through a motion of around the tier 3 that's showing up right now is tier 3, and whether or not to just go ahead before Monday. Right now, it's just to take out those tier 3 bills, unless you want to wait till Monday.
Madam Chair, the document before us, maybe I'm looking at the wrong one, but if it's the summary that Carol provided, there's no language on it that says tier 3 that I'm seeing.
Yes, it's the graph that I think we were talking about, the lower left
Okay, you're talking about the quadrant, the lower quadrant?
of the graph, of which what we could do, if you'd like, is
Move that if that's what you're talking about. So
that is what I was referring to.
So moved.
Do I have a second? I just need a second to the motion.
I second.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded that all of the LD bills that are showing up in the lower left quadrant, tier 3, would be automatically removed from further consideration. Any discussion? Yes, Carol.
I just wanted to clarify, thank you, Madam Chair. Do you intend to remove those prior to additional input? In other words, do you want me to, I'm not sure this is a good use of time, but do you want me to try to delete all of those from the worksheets and resend the worksheets? Or are we waiting until Monday's deadline, and then as you begin your deliberations, we're removing the obvious the cluster that will become the new tier 3?
Madam Chair, I don't mind amending my motion that that post after all the additional information is received, that we would eliminate tier 3 from our deliberative process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Lewis, a second.
Second.
Second that.
It's been moved and probably second for that friendly amendment. And I will open up for discussion before we take the vote. That was my understanding of it, and I thank you for the clarification in the question, Carol, and for moving it, Reverend Lewis, indeed. Any further discussion?
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Yes.
So are we getting new worksheets? I mean, and we're gonna rate this all over again, or no?
No, the remaining commissioners who have not been able to respond and fill out their priority setting tool.
Okay.
We're giving those commissioners and any legislator who wants to opt into the process an additional time to get those completed, 3 p.m. on Monday. And the second thing we're doing is, in Carol's analysis, once she can determine those tier 3 bills that will not reach a level of further debate, she's has the authority, based on this vote, to automatically remove them so that we're no longer discussing those bills.
Thank you.
That's what we're voting on. No, thank you for the question. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of,
I have a question.
yep, please go ahead.
I might be misunderstanding. So if they're in tier 3, there would be no opportunity for us to continue to consider them, or is that what we're deciding right?
So my answer, and others may have different answers. My answer is that yes, that is what we're deciding. But throughout this process, Carol, correct me if I'm wrong, a permanent commission member can ask for a bill to come back for some consideration. So as a block, we are removing them. But it is my understanding that if you can make a case for something to be further considered, that up until the final vote, that as a commissioner, you have that ability and flexibility to do that. Carol, am I correct in that? Or Megan, am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, that was my understanding.
So
I
if
think
they're
it's just really trying to find a way to like condense this larger, harder to evaluate number of bills into a smaller, more manageable number of bills that have possibly identified ease and impact, and then but with the opportunity to say, hey, we really missed this one, let's pull that back in.
That's correct. Carol?
I would agree with what Megan just said, because I think the idea is not, and I don't want to put words in Reverend Lewis's mouth, so I want to hear if I'm hearing this right, but the idea is to make this easier to grapple with, but not really, we're not truly eliminating anything, but the new charts and graphs that you receive after all the worksheets have been submitted will not show 154 bills. They'll show, something close to 50.
That's my assumption, Carol, that trying to make a little bit easier process, but I was under the understanding that any commissioner could bring something back for consideration. And so it would behoove us to hold on to those particular LDs if that we feel that we want to bring that conversation back to the full group. So that's my intention.
Thank you. Did that answer the question thoroughly enough, Isaiah?
Yeah.
So I'll just reiterate it before we take the vote. At any point in time, if there is a bill that any commission member wants for us to reconsider up until the final vote, that is part of this process. I will also remind you that once we have gotten to a point where we've eliminated the tier 3s, I know there are a number of you who represent constituencies that want to take that list and get some input from those constituencies. So there is some back and forth between those stakeholders whom you represent and making sure that those voices have been part of any deliberations moving forward. So there will be time built in for you to discuss this list with your constituents. So any further discussion before we take this vote? Hearing none, seeing none. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand.
Raising my hand.
Thank you, Isaiah. Any abstentions, any opposed? Let the record reflect that that was a unanimous vote. And so we will proceed by Monday. Carol, if you could give the commission just an understanding when we might see the list as we've just discussed it further called.
I will happily produce that on Tuesday morning.
Thank you. So we are at 12:29. We do have about another 20 minutes to continue to discuss this. Any more discussion around the data? And I don't hear anyone. We can move into talking about the decision-making process. And then we need to talk about our final product. And I'm going to ask Megan to lead us in the discussion about the timeline when we get there. So the decision-making process, we had at an earlier meeting made a determination that that would be 100% consensus that would go into some kind of a final product. Can open it up for discussion on any questions around that, any feelings about it now that we've gone through almost 3 full phases of this process. Are we still confident that that is the best way to make decisions on the final list? Any feedback on that at all?
I think it's Reverend Lewis. I think it's still appropriate, and I think we should continue with what we previously had decided. I think it will make for a good process.
Madam Chair, I completely agree with Reverend Lewis. And one thing I might add to maybe get at some of the questions where we've had some bills, you know, particularly for me, I'm not as well versed in the bills relating to tribal sovereignty, and there's slight nuances across all of them, and I can't always tell like the best, you know, what would be the best one for the commission to support as a whole, you know, and does one have to go before the other, for example? And so if there's some way to, and I'm just using that as an example, but in my own observation, I just saw some thematic areas, and Bruce and I talked about this with our subcommittee. Just, I think some themes arose in terms of the topics that were important, and that, you know, like justice reform or tribal sovereignty, or, you know, you could go down the list. But if there's a way to draw out some of those, and it may get at some of the, well, some pieces of legislation may not have risen to the top tier, but were still noted by the commission, that may be a way to capture some of those pieces. So I just raised that as an observation, but I know it's a challenge to do that, work. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that will be helpful, and maybe Megan can give some voice to this, is once we have gotten to a place of deliberation, if you will, talking about each LD, I think it would be important for the commissioners to have as much updated information about that bill as possible. Any amendments that have been introduced, and certainly any fiduciary impact would be helpful, with an understanding about where the state is headed, given the impact of the pandemic on our economy. So I believe that, Megan, if you can speak to this, that it would be very helpful for us to be as thorough as possible in this recommendation of priority bills, to actually know their status and to know any amendments and what the fiscal impact will look like.
Yeah, so what I would propose is, once Carol produces the final data on Tuesday, Reggie and I can work with that to add in some additional columns. We would, of course, add the LD number, the title, and then some information about the status of the bill in committee or on the floor, and fiscal note, and those sort of things, to help give you some more information on it. And then if there are bills in that tier 3 category that we've kicked out that people want to add in for further discussion, we can provide that information on an as requested basis.
Thank you. Any further discussion around this component, the decision-making consensus? It sounds like we're still good with the model that methodology that we've chosen. So we will talk a little bit about the final product, and we have been talking about it like it is a report. I think, Megan, if you could just give the commission some understanding about the different ways in which we could have a final product just for our consideration. So
Yeah.
we know, you know, who's writing it, if we need to write it, all of those pieces that allow us to see this final product and envision it right now. That would be helpful.
So I think in terms of a document that is useful to the legislature, something that has some pretty concise top line recommendations and also kind of is more of a highlight and high level detail of what those recommendations are and why they are made that way, kind of in a narrative report style, but potentially with, you know, brief bits on specific bills and maybe a little bit about the process as well. I think there is some administrative support our office can provide. Katie is willing to help sort of put that document together, but I think what would be most helpful is if there is a small potentially subcommittee of this group that would be willing to kind of help get that information to her, and then she can put it in some kind of narrative form and work with that group to produce a draft report that could then be approved by the full committee, is sort of my first thoughts on it, and something our sort of planning group had talked about a little yesterday. And whether or not there's some charts with a list of bills, or just, you know, it's hard to say exactly what it would look like based on how many bills you actually end up recommending. If it's literally 5 bills that you end up recommending, maybe you write a little bit more about each one and why those recommendations were made. If it's a longer list of bills, you know, maybe that looks a little bit differently. And maybe there is some space for, here's what we think the legislature should do now, and here are some things that should come back in the future and be given more consideration, and here's why.
How do folks feel about forming a small subcommittee, if I heard the suggestion correctly, of this group to work with Katie Walsh on conceptualizing a final product and contributing to the degree that makes sense? A subcommittee of folks? What are folks thinking, feeling about that? You're quite a group
I like
today.
the idea of a subcommittee.
Yeah, I like the idea, and I'd be willing to participate.
I think it's a good idea. I'm not sure how much I will be available the next couple of weeks because we have some COVID stuff going on here. But I think it makes sense to do that, to have the sort of deliberation that's really needed on these things. So thanks for bringing that up.
I could volunteer to be on the subcommittee as well. I think I have a pretty open schedule.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'll be on it. Garrett Stewart.
Madam Chair, I think it would be helpful if there was a sample of a report or something that has gone from a commission in the past. It might give the permanent commission some sense for what these things look like. I don't know if everyone has seen legislative reports before, but that might be helpful to, if staff has something similar that people could look at.
Yeah, Reggie, would that be something you would be able to work on, finding a couple examples of some other commission reports that were submitted to the legislature?
Yeah, sure.
Great, thank you.
No problem. Yeah.
So thank you, Reggie, for getting that out. And there are a number of different If you could, Reggie, not all reports are equal, so maybe one or two that show different formats. The opioid task force had a different report than long-term care workers, that kind of thing. So just something that gives us a flavor for the formatting and the content. Thank you, Reggie. I may have missed someone, but I had on a subcommittee, Joby, Isaiah, and Garrett. Anyone else want to join us? Okay. If you change your mind, there's plenty of time to raise your hand and get involved. But for the record, we'll show that as the current kind of report writing subcommittee. Thank you. So timeline, we are now at 12:40, so we're right on time. Megan, you want to talk to us a little bit about the shifting time frame for us? So.
Sure. It's pretty clear at this point, just because of the lead time, the legislature would need to get itself back together to hold a special session, that the original target of August 10th is not likely for the legislature reconvening. So that original deadline of a report, but between the 5th and the 7th really now could be pushed back at least a full week, if not a little bit more, I would think, and still be in a safe period of time. I also think that coordinates well with the work that the Judiciary Committee is still continuing to do today. I'm not sure if they will complete all their work today or not. It sounds like they have a very big day ahead of them. I would think, it's clearly up to the commission, but I think something within 7 to 10 days of the previous deadline would be acceptable.
Thank you. I would just add that the Judiciary Committee has not finished its work. In fact, we are scheduled for next Friday as well to look another full day of looking at tribal, some of the tribal bills, particularly LD 2094. So the Judiciary Committee will not finish its work for at least another full week. So that does give us some time, considerably more time. As everyone understand, I think the judiciary is the last. I know VLA, Veterans and Legal Affairs, is meeting today as well, but I believe they're going to complete their work. But once all the committees complete their work, then we can go about scheduling. So we have a little bit of time. Great. So.
Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
Do we have to take action on this, or is this something we can do just from a common consent perspective based on the realities of the legislative calendar? Do we have to take a vote to push things back or anything like that?
I do not believe that we do, since the time frame was self-imposed and a kind of a guesstimate from, I believe Carol kind of set that calendar based on an understanding that we'd go back in on the 10th. So I'll let Carol reply to that more specifically.
Madam Chair, you're correct. We set the calendar originally just to align with what we thought would be a legislative calendar.
And Reverend Lewis, we never took a vote on the calendar, on the original calendar.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. Any feedback at all? I really wanted to spend a couple of minutes, if folks feel inclined to do so, to just talk about where you're all at individually with this process. I wanted to just give some voice to the fact that, we formed a permanent commission based off of chapter law, and all of you were duly appointed by the appointing authority. When we started this work, we had no idea that we would be in this process. But our commission was formed for exactly this, to advise all three branches of government. And so this is the type of work that will help define the mission of this commission and the products that we're able to deliver back to the people of the state of Maine. So I know that when we started, it was not based on a schedule quite as robust as the one we've had. And I know that that's put a little bit of pressure on your own lives and the work that you do. But so I want to check in. I just want to check in with where everyone's at and how they're feeling about participating so far. Once this process is over, it is my intention to elicit a strategic plan process for this commission so that we have a firm direction in which to go in, to pass a budget and look at some fund development, as well as for this commission to get trained and have presentations on the 3 different branches of government that we're advising so that we all know what we're doing, as well as Wabanaki Reach, or to understand what restorative justice is, but to go through a training and education process for our work. But I did just want to give some voice to how everyone's feeling right now in participating on this commission.
Madam Chair, it seems like I'm pretty quick to seek to respond. I've appreciated the process. I agree with you wholeheartedly about the need for some technical assistance in education on the joint standing committees of the legislature, the various parts of government where we may have purview, as well as maybe some opportunity to see what other like commissions do, what we do for policy and process, and the need for strategic planning. I think your leadership has been exemplary during this process. I've learned a lot, and I look forward to a strategic plan and a clear focus as we move into the next year. So thank you.
Dee, please.
I appreciate that I was able to be on this. Thank you for including me. And I appreciate those that I met around the Zoom. It meant a lot to me. It continues to mean a lot to me because I know that bills impact everybody's life somehow or another, even when people aren't aware of it. I think the process for me was not new because I'm used to being in collaboration and so forth and dialogue. But I was a little bit surprised at how independent it was. And then looking at the YouTube videos, I saw some committee members went through their bills together of what they liked or didn't like. And I think I would have preferred that. One, to educate myself, and then my voice maybe educate somebody else of my opinion, I don't know. So I was a little bit disappointed in that part. And then, of all the years of living here in Maine, not all bills that are supposedly going to impact everybody actually trickle down and have an impact on Black and Brown and Indigenous people of color. We know that. That's why the commission's here, and it's awesome. So a little bit, please forgive me, wondering, looking at what bills they are by number. Oh, are there good bills that disappeared? Or, oh, are those bills that confuse me? And I thought, how are they going to impact some people I know that are very poor, who aren't white, that it didn't have impact them the last time. So that's a little bit tricky for me, and that's my concern. So I'm trusting this group here that went through those bills, but at the same time, I'm thinking, I don't think that one's going to really have an impact for people of color. So I just wanted to put that out there. And I do look forward to the next steps as we go forward, but I just want to be honest and upfront and open to learning. Thank you.
I think I would like to just add that I think it's great how from the beginning of the meetings of this group that we have decided to take action. Almost every meeting we made decisions that involved taking proactive action despite our collective lack of maybe experience in how some of these things work. And this process in particular, I think is a great example of that. And I think not only for us, but for legislative staff and for legislators, I think this is new for all of us on how to analyze bills based on their racial impact. And instead of waiting until we have lots of deliberation about the right way to do it, we just dove in and started doing it. And so it's been a learning process. It hasn't always been easy. It's been a breakneck pace, but I think that we're all learning a lot and that we can use those lessons for the future. And I hope we continue to go through processes like this, hopefully at a better, more manageable pace, but for future sessions. So thank you, everyone, for being willing to do this and for your leadership, Representative Ross.
Well, we will have more opportunity to discuss this. And I think that one of the things that some of the design team has been talking about is how this process has allowed us to see all of the things that we will need in order to build our own capacity, what financial and human resources are necessary to support this kind of work. It is all new to all of us. This is a journey we're all taking together. It's brand new. It's never been done in the state of Maine. And so to the extent that we are all contributing to what will be informed for a long-term sustainable process of evaluation around racial equity and justice and around the elimination of systemic racism, we are all, the entire state is taking this step forward together. We are all taking this, we're on this journey together. So I will just give some accolades to the work that Carol Kelly has put into this. She's volunteered a considerable amount of time. It's the brains behind the methodology and in keeping us all educated around next steps. She's been available 24 hours a day since we started this. And I just really want to speak to the brilliance of Carol and her commitment to this work and to making sure that we did it in a way that was completely defensible and transparent. So the thanks are to Carol, and sincerely, very, very deeply grateful to Carol.
Absolutely, absolutely.
We are at 12:52. If there is no other business that we need to take care of on behalf of the commission. I know that Megan has had to step off of the call just about 5 minutes ago. And so as long as we've answered all of the questions about moving forward, it sounds to me like on Tuesday morning, we will have another set of data in which to discuss. I believe from this point forward, we will send out a doodle poll to get the next meeting scheduled. I believe I received some information, an email from Reverend Lewis who said, can we adjust some of the time and look at some other times of days to meet? So why don't we think of that as an opportunity to think about our scheduling moving forward. We'll try to put something together, Carol, with your help around benchmark dates, and then we'll get the time of day scheduled with all of your help. Any further comments, feedback? I will put Jane. Yes.
While all the staff is probably not on the line anymore, but I just want to take the opportunity. Some of the legislative staff, the staff folks who have helped us tremendously along with Carol. I can't imagine how much work you've had to do to add this to your portfolio of to-dos, but I've been very appreciative at the responsiveness and the assistance that they have offered this commission, and me specifically. So kudos to you folks, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you, and I'll pass it on to Katie and Megan too. Thank you, Reverend Lewis.
So without any further comment, I want to thank the Department of Labor and Cheryl Moran for her assistance as well. Thank you to the legislative staff. Thank you, Carol. Thank you to the legislators who were able to join us today, and for all of those who are listening and watching and participating with this process. We appreciate all of that support and all of your input. I want to thank each and every one of you as commission members for your time, particularly now, but for signing up for this work. We want to absolutely acknowledge all of that. And if I could get a motion to adjourn.
Awesome job, everyone.
Thank you, Reverend. Thank you, Representative. Thank you for joining us, Representative Hickman. Thank you for your leadership as well.
So move, Madam Chair.
Seconded.
Second.
So it's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of adjournment, please raise your hand.
I'm raising my hand.
Thank you. It is unanimous. We are adjourned. Have a great weekend and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.